Dear listeners, what if the thing you were most ashamed of was actually the most honest thing about you? We spend so much of our lives performing, like performing desire, performing healing, performing who we think we are supposed to be behind the closed doors. And somewhere in all that performing, we lose the thread back to ourselves. So today's guest found her way back, and she did it by speaking the thing out loud that most of us are still too afraid to whisper. So, dear listeners, stay with me. This one goes deep. So, here, dear listeners, welcome back to another powerful episode of Pleasure Principles. I'm your host, Avik, and this is the show where we don't look away from the real conversations around intimacy, identity, and what it actually means to live in your truth. So, dear listeners, my guest today, please welcome Kali Rose. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today. I'm very honored to be here and share my perspective and story on, I guess, pleasure and its principles.
Exactly. So, thank you so much, Kali, for joining us today. And before we get into the discussion, dear listeners, I'd quickly love to introduce Kali. So, Kali, she is host of Season Bacon. Am I pronouncing right?
Yes, segs and bacon. Yes.
Perfect. So, dear listeners, she's the host of Session Bacon, Sex, Love, Unfiltered Truths, a sex positive advocate and the community builder who spent 15 years in social work before channeling her lived experience and I would say hard won wisdom into a platform that where shame simply does not survive. And today we are talking about the radical reclamation, like what it really means to stop performing, start healing, and come home to yourself. So, whether you've been carrying shame quietly for years or you are just beginning to ask who you are without the weight of other people's expectations, and this conversation is for you. So, I'll not take much of time. Let's get started. Welcome to the show again, Kali.
Thank you for having me.
So Kali, like before we get into everything that you have built, I want to start somewhere like a bit personal. You described your journey as a reclamation of your soul. And definitely that's a powerful phrase. So, what was the moment that you realized that something had actually been taken from you and that you wanted it back?
Well, I had gone through a lifetime of trauma, and with each trauma, it fragments you. Sometimes a piece stays with the person, sometimes it stays in a place. And over time, I would feel these energy drains that I wasn't able to like fix and nurture with, I guess, my limited tools because I hadn't really awoken to the spiritual side of things. And I had a past in the mental health, I guess, industry, not working in it, but like just a very bad experience in my teens
Mm,
with Western medicine and how it's not there to heal you, it's here there to numb you and
mm,
just take away any feelings. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to not feel and lose my mind again to substances and chemicals. And so I started with some research before I had a very like intense awakening through a near death experience and things like salt baths and energy work, meditation and energy clearing are things that I started on, even though they weren't exactly solutions because I had
mm,
to make a lot of changes within myself, like leaving the industry for a number of years to call back pieces that I realized or discovered soul fragmentation. And if you don't call back the energy, it doesn't know to come back. Like the intent behind it and just having the intent and visualization meditations, I could
mm.
feel myself like filling back up with my spirit. And I mean, it's a different way of alchemizing your pain and turning it into gold, I feel. Like almost like those Japanese broken things.
So, here also I'd love to come up with one very common word, which is we often call as a misconception. So, I mean, there's a phrase that you use and that I love the most is you call yourself your favorite SLUT.
Yes.
Correct. And I think for a lot of people, even people who consider themselves open-minded, there's
Mhm.
still a kind of, I would say, reaction to that word, right? And obviously, tightening. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, like when you look at the way people understand sexuality and the self-expression, what is the biggest thing that they are getting wrong?
That they're hiding from judgment of others.
I mean,
Mm.
how they will, think about that person.
Yes, how people will view them in their private lives because sometimes sex is only for marriage, and that's still a big, like, belief in society, and anything
Uh,
outside of that is completely shameful, and I'm here to bring or break that misconception and, bring enlightenment to others that sexuality and your sexual energy and the way you show up to your sex life is so powerful in the way that the more you embrace it, even if you're not telling everyone what you're doing
mm,
Saturday night, you embrace
yeah,
it enough within yourself that it gives you confidence and helps fuel you to show up a different way in society with other people. And a lot of people lack certain skills, and it is rooted in their intimacy practice and their connection with their sexuality.
I agree. I totally agree. And also, um, I mean, where do you think that misunderstanding actually comes from? Like, is it the culture or is it the stories that we are inherited or it's something else only?
I feel like it's a mix, but it comes from religion. And right now, we're in a very interesting time to be alive. And
Mhm.
there are a lot of connections that used to be mostly conspiracy
Yeah.
around how much certain, I guess, powers and authorities have influenced religion and how they use religion in a way that they know by telling certain stories of certain people who have walked this earth and have been enlightened beings and embodied beings by saying that they were celibate, by saying that they didn't partake in sexual acts or intimate acts and
Mm,
embodying that. And by saying that it's sin, you are literally giving someone a guidebook on how not to ever access the energy, but you're telling the story of some of the greatest human potential out there, like, ever reached, and it's almost like a form of it is a form of deception, but black magic because you wouldn't know unless you did decide to stray away and look for answers yourself.
exactly. And definitely it's interesting because the shame
Mm.
is really ours originally. I mean, is it? Like we absorb it, right? And from the families, from systems, from people we benefited from our silence. And then one day, we're out here clarifying something that was never really meant to be ours in the first place. So, I mean, that brings me to something that I want to definitely explore a little deeper. So, you talk about 15 years of social work and using that experience as a lens for understanding human behavior, especially calling out the patterns of people who benefited from your silence. So that's a strong observation. And what are some of the, or maybe some of those patterns you started to see, not just in others, but in yourself, that were keeping you smaller than you needed to be?
I mean, everyone has a different
Mm,
upbringing,
yeah.
so they will see something different than I did. I saw what my parents did and how for the longest time in my late teens and early 20s, I wanted to feel validated and to feel loved and to almost try to rewrite like, what happened with my parents and realizing that the people that I was doing this with was they were all looking for external or looking for me to always seek external validation. There was never really any growth, and as soon as growth started to happen, people would start to use the shame, the guilt, and it doesn't matter if it's connected or not. Long as you have someone have it like, if you get into someone's mind and give them inklings of any doubts about themselves and what they're doing or pursuing, then it starts to eat at them if they're not doing the work and have faced that part of themselves.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't tell you when it started, but maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, I really saw, like, the patterns of, like, dating my mother in particular. The father figure thing, that one was easier to work through because of the control aspect. I'm like,
Mm.
"Okay, as soon as you're telling me what to do, then no," but I didn't realize how deep my mother's, effect had on me on the emotionally unavailable people, and then the super I guess holier than thou in a way, like, you have
Yeah.
to be a certain way, and even if these people have these sides to them, they don't show them and they don't own them either. Very hypocritical energy, and I didn't really ever have shame around a lot of things, especially sexuality, so people use that as a weakness, and, I mean, it doesn't bother me anymore. That's why I call myself what I do, because and made the acronym the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part that doesn't get said enough. Like sometimes we are not waiting for the permission to speak, but we have already beaten everyone else to the punch by silencing ourselves first. So that's not just personal, and that's a pattern with the roots. And what you are saying is really, I would say, the archaeology of that, understanding like where I mean, actually started before you can decide where it ends. And if you talk about everyday part, everyday reality, you use a phrase that stayed with me, which is curated intimacy. And this idea that we are seeing highlight kind of reels of romance and polished version of self care, while behind the closed doors, millions of people are kind of, I'd say, suffocating. So, what does that actually look like in someone's day to day life? Like, how does that exhaustion show up in small or maybe the ordinary moments also?
Um, well, there are self-medicating aspects where, alcohol use can be a main factor in a partnership's life to keep it fueled, and that's whenever connection sometimes happens, and some people just give the, pattern the benefit of the doubt and say that it's just society and the way society like, the career, we both have jobs that
Mm,
lead us to neglect one another,
yeah,
but it's really just society putting this view and this condition. Like, I think the nuclear family was created right after World War II, and so
true.
before then, it wasn't even, like, common to necessarily marry one person and make sure you had the kids, and, I mean, things were like that in certain cultures, but it wasn't like it is now. It literally is a template, the American dream, and not a lot of people look outside of, like, what that dream can be for them, and I've asked, like, throughout my years, like, meeting different men and asking them what they thought the American dream was, and most of them say the car, the house, the wife, the kids, the boat, like, the career trips, and it's all things
Yeah,
that are great, but it's like you put that before what a healthy partnership is. Like, you don't say the American dream is healthy love, healthy marriage,
yeah,
happy children. It's all of these other things.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. I mean, most of us we talk about the American dreams, right? So you're exactly correct. Like, what comes first is like the money, the car, the house, a good life. So yeah, definitely. And so for someone who doesn't even fully recognize, I mean, what's usually the first sign that they are performing a version of themselves that does not exist?
I mean, for partnership, it usually is deception and infidelity.
Mm,
And for self, I mean, that's self abandonment, never being capable of being alone, even if you are single. People who jump in and out of relationships, serial or like monogamous, serial monogamy, inability to be alone and sit with your thoughts to even discover what you actually want because like people would rather avoid that part of themselves because that part of themselves they don't make room to fulfill those desires and give themselves those needs. They have it conditioned in their mind that, well, I have all of these things. I must like be like chemically off. It has to be something else. It's not the fact that these things are just things that you were told and taught to want, not
mm,
what you actually want.
exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's not always a kind of a dramatic breakdown. Sometimes it's just quite exhaustion of showing up as someone you don't fully recognize anyone, right? So, and, and I think that's where your work sits, and it's kind of invitation before someone hits that wall. So, uh, and if you talk about the practice also, right? Like the I mean, your psychology is built right on three pillars like radical accountability, the
Mhm.
death of taboo, and the community as a medicine. So, I want to ask you about the accountability piece specifically because I think a lot of people confuse accountability with the kind of self blame, right? So, and they are not the same thing.
No,
So,
they
how
aren't.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, as in, like, how do you help someone sit with that hard truths that about their own choices without kind of becoming kind of self punishment?
Well, you take the accountability, like ownership of the actions that weren't in your highest alignment and that probably hurt your relationship, hurt others
Mm,
possibly too. Because I've seen it happen a lot, especially like with marriages falling apart and then leading to divorce. Like it's always one person's fault and only that person's fault. And it's never the person who's being blamed either.
yeah.
Um, and it takes honesty, radical honesty with self to be like, well, I did not choose myself and I allowed things to go on for so long without actually repairing or trying to repair, even if things are especially when things are dead, because that's usually when infidelity starts to truly happen. I mean, some people are just unfaithful, and that's another issue within themselves, and they shouldn't choose
Mhm.
monogamy. They should choose polygamy and to be ethically open. And so that's choosing to stay in the dark and having a lifestyle that doesn't fit you, that's ownership, that's accountability for how you showed up. And if it is another partner who just
Yeah.
isn't showing up, who's lost interest, doesn't want to engage in passion or intimacy, then that's ownership of being like, well, I stayed too long and I need to end things and not trying to take the self blame, take the punishment by staying
Mm,
silent, which can happen when you're just seeking constant forgiveness, taking accountability, take your shit, or sorry, my language, take your stuff and face the unknown. It's not as like scary as you think. You're not gonna end up on the streets unless you're doing some
mm.
crazy stuff and lose your job and your career and everything. Divorce is divorce. It's healthy for everyone involved or ending things in that manner.
I understand. So I want to ask you something for the person who is listening right now, or maybe they'll be listening later, who hasn't told anyone. Maybe they have been carrying sexual shame, relation or kind of relational pain also, some version of themselves that they are terrified to let out. And they are sitting with this kind of conversation in their ears and thinking, I don't know if I can do what she said. So, what would you want them to hear right now?
I know it's easier said than done, in a lot of people's perspective, but it really is gratifying, the blessings that come with trusting the unknown. Staying in the known, you can expect the lack of passion, the lack of intimacy, the lack of
Mhm.
fulfillment, just and not experiencing, I guess, oneself fully and embracing that side. But just imagine like a reality which does exist, given you letting go of the ties of people who try to keep you from embracing that side of yourself, because it does take cutting people out and not allowing certain voices that keep those thoughts and conditions in place and keep you small. Uh, I would just say that the gift and the blessings of the experience can only be obtained and truly, like, felt. I can only explain it so much. You have to take the steps, you have to. It or
Exactly.
you can stick with the known and, be super unhappy, and that leads to one's own mental deterioration where people start to act out their shadows without healthy, like, outlets, and
Yeah,
that's something to be ashamed of. Whenever you start, like, acting out in ways that, I mean, either hurt yourself, hurt others, that are detrimental to your health.
I agree. So, it's really great to hear from you. And Kali, like, I know there are people who are listening right now who definitely want to find you, follow you, become a part of the community that you have built. So, where should they find you?
You can find me at my website. We are sluts.team. I'm also found on Segs and Bacon throughout different platforms with my show. You can probably find it on my Instagram or TikTok by using that handle. And thank you for having me,
Amazing.
by the way. These questions were
Amazing.
amazing.
Amazing. Then, yeah, I mean, it's really great to have you here. And so, dear listeners, I definitely love to mention that all of that is going to be in the show notes. Go find her, go listen, and go easy on yourself while you do. So, and
More than
with
anything,
this, exactly. So,
easy and
exactly, exactly, very, very true. So, dear listeners, that's a wrap of today's episode on pleasure principles. And thank you so much, Kali, for bringing the whole unfiltered, honest self, I'd say, into this conversation. And thank you for showing up and listening, dear listeners. That already means a lot. And if this episode moved something in you, even just a little, also share it with someone who might need it. You never know who is sitting on the other side of the silence, right? So, with this hope, this is your host, Avik, and this is Pleasure Principles. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much.